All right, let's get into one of the wildest, most unbelievable true stories I think I've ever come across. It really does sound like something straight out of a movie, but I promise you this actually happened. And the whole thing centers on one single, totally mind-bending question.
Now really, just stop and think about that for a second. What if you just woke up one day with absolutely no memory, no clue who you were, no past? How in the world would you even begin to figure it all out? Where would you even look for, well, for yourself?
Well, for this one guy, after years of being completely lost in the dark, his only move left was a total Hail Mary. He decided to put his face on one of the biggest TV shows in the country and just ask America for help.
He was hoping, to find his family, a home, some piece of the life he'd lost. But what he found instead was, wow, it was a story of crime, of danger, and a past that was so much darker than anything he could have dreamed up. So let's break it down.
Okay, so our story kicks off in just about the most jarring way possible. A man just wakes up. He's alone, he's totally confused, and he has zero idea how he got there or even who he is. The date is July 13th, 1994. He finds himself lying in a ditch in Cheyenne, Wyoming. His head is absolutely throbbing, there's a huge lump on the back of it, and he's got these weird bruises encircling both of his wrists. He can't remember a single thing except for three names that just sort of float up out of nowhere: Pat, Joel, and Chris. He has no clue who they are, but he has this gut feeling that they're really, really important. So he starts checking his pockets, right? And all he finds is 23 cents and a comb. That's it. No wallet, no ID, nothing. Eventually, he makes his way to a homeless shelter, but they need a name for the paperwork. So on the spot, he just grabs one of the names from his head, Pat, and then looks at the color of the desk he's standing at, which is brown. And just like that, he becomes Pat Brown.
He's desperate, so he goes to the police and just lays it all out there. He tells them his impossible situation, this crazy story, which is basically that he knows nothing. He's a complete blank slate, just begging someone, anyone, to help him figure out who he is.
And this is where things get interesting. The police? They're pretty skeptical. They kind of think he might be on drugs or having some kind of breakdown. So they run his description. They check the missing persons database. Nothing. Not a single match. They do notice one tiny thing, though. A callus on his left ring finger, like he'd worn a wedding band for a very long time. But besides that little detail, they basically tell him their hands are tied. He's an adult, he's not in any immediate danger, so it's not really a police matter. Just like that, Pat is completely on his own.
So, with absolutely no help and no memories, Pat decides to leave Cheyenne. He heads for Jackson, Wyoming, because he'd heard you could find work there without an ID. And this is where he begins this really slow, bizarre process of trying to build a new life, all while these strange little clues from his old one start bubbling to the surface.
It's wild. He gets a clerical job, and he discovers he has these skills he didn't know he had. He can use one of those old-school adding machines by touch without even looking. He can do complicated math problems in his head. And for some reason, he just gets the stock market. At the same time, he feels this overwhelming urge to go to a Catholic church. And when he does, he realizes he knows every single prayer by heart. It's like his body remembers this life that his mind has completely locked away.
And then the biggest clue of all hits him. He starts having this recurring dream. In the dream, there's a little boy named Joel who runs up to him, calls him Dad, and says something about a person named Chris. All of a sudden, those three names that have been rattling around in his head since day one, they finally seem to be connected.
So, this is the crucial part. He starts putting the puzzle pieces together. The callus on his finger, he must have been married. The dream, Joel and Chris must have been his kids. And that first name in his head, Pat, that had to be his wife's name. And what about his knack for numbers? Well, he figured he must have been an accountant. And so this whole identity, this married, devoutly Catholic family man, it becomes the only thing he has to hold on to.
But years start to go by. He's living this half-life, stuck in limbo. These clues gave him a ghost of a past, but no real way to get it back. He realizes that if he's ever going to find out the truth, he's going to have to do something really big. For 3.5 years, just imagine that. For 3.5 years, he lives as Pat Brown, a man with no history. The mental toll of that, of just never knowing, of looking in the mirror and seeing a stranger every single day, it's unimaginable. By the end of 1997, he decides he just can't do it anymore. So he takes this massive leap of faith.
He writes a letter to the producers of the show Unsolved Mysteries. He tells them his whole insane story and basically begs them to feature him. His thinking was, look, if my face gets broadcast to the entire country, somebody, somewhere, has to recognize me, right?
And the show, of course, says yes. The story is just too good to pass up. So on April 10th, 1998, millions and millions of people tune in, and they see the face of Pat Brown, a man with total amnesia asking for help to solve the greatest mystery of all, his own life. And it works. The show generates a phone call. But the truth that comes flooding in is not the wholesome family reunion story he'd built up in his head. Oh no, it's something else entirely. So picture this, a house 1,500 miles away in Indiana. The phone rings. It's a woman's cousin, and she's frantic, screaming, "You need to turn on the TV right now." So the woman flips to the channel, she sees the face of Pat Brown, and she almost collapses. She knows exactly who that man is.
And boom, here is the unbelievable twist. The man on television wasn't some lost soul named Pat Brown. His real name was Carl Brodnick Jr., and he wasn't a missing person. He was a wanted felon. He was an accountant who had embezzled tens of thousands of dollars from his company, and he had vanished just a couple of days before he woke up in that ditch in Wyoming.
And with that one phone call, all those little clues suddenly snap into a much, much darker picture. Pat, Joel, and Chris, they were real, all right? They were the names of his wife and 2 sons. His Catholic faith, that was genuine. But his expert accounting skills? Yeah, they weren't just for some boring day job. They were the very tools he used to commit a federal crime. The life he couldn't remember was the life he was running from.
Okay, but that just raises an even crazier question, right? If he was a fugitive on the run, why on earth would he go on national television? Well, the leading theory suggests he wasn't just running from the cops. He might have been running for his life.
So here's what investigators think happened. Carl didn't just steal that money for himself. He was probably in deep debt to some very scary people. He embezzled the cash to pay them off, but maybe it wasn't enough, so he fled. They think those people tracked him down, tortured him for the money, which would explain those marks on his wrists and the severe head trauma, and then just dumped his body in a ditch, leaving him for dead. The attack was so brutal, it literally wiped his memory clean.
So what happened after the show? Well, his wife, Pat, was the one who made the call. Carl had a very brief reunion with his family, and then he was immediately arrested. In court, he pleaded guilty to the embezzlement charge, but he insisted the whole time he had absolutely zero memory of doing it. Given the whole, insane circumstances, the judge actually gave him probation instead of prison. He then went on to resume his life as Carl Brodnick Jr., a man who had to live with the consequences of a past he couldn't even remember.
And that ultimately leaves us with this really fascinating philosophical question to chew on. If the part of your brain that committed a crime is just gone, totally erased by trauma, is the person you are today still guilty? It's a deep question about memory, identity, and what justice really means, and there are just no easy answers.